Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the psychological evaluation of serial killers. Tonight, we're going to be doing Vlad the Impaler. So, Vlad III, commonly known as Vlad the Impaler, was a 15th century ruler of Wallachia, now part of modern day Romania. He gained a reputation for his brutal methods of punishing and executing his enemies. Often, it would involve impalement. While it's challenging to conduct a direct psychological evaluation of historical figures, especially those from distant centuries ago, some aspects of Vlad's behavior can be examined from a historical and also a cultural perspective. So, the first thing I want to talk about is sadistic tendencies. Vlad the Impaler's preferred method of execution was impalement, and that was exceptionally cruel and sadistic. His use of violence as a means of punishment suggests a willingness to inflict severe pain and suffering. That brings us to control and fear, because Vlad's brutal methods were not only about punishment, but they were also about establishing control and instilling fear. The impalement of thousands served as a gruesome spectacle that aimed to deter his enemies and to maintain authority. His brutal methods were also a military strategy. Vlad's use of terror extended to his military strategy. He employed psychological warfare by strategically placing impaled bodies to create a psychological impact on invading forces, contributing to a sense of dread and horror. Now, it's important when we look at this that we consider the cultural context, because Vlad the Impaler operated within a historical and a cultural context where cruelty and harsh punishments were not that uncommon. It was a different time. The political and military challenges of his time, including threats from the Ottoman Empire, influenced his approach to governance and the methods that he was willing to use to maintain his power. You have to realize that the Ottomans were a very, very powerful force, and they were pretty much conquering at will. And Vlad was in a situation where he was kind of surrounded by a bunch of really scary and deadly enemies. So you've got two different theories, two different ways that you can lead and maintain control. You either have to be the biggest dog on the block, so nobody wants to mess with you because you're just a big bad dude, and your military is super powerful and you're scary. That's one way to remain safe and to have control of your country. The other way, if you don't have the largest military and the most strength, is to be the crazy guy. Because even if you're a smaller country, nobody wants to mess with the crazy guy. In modern day examples, you would have like the United States is the biggest, baddest dude on the block. We have the most powerful military, and nobody messes with us because we can destroy them. But then you have smaller countries like North Korea, for example. Whether it's Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, multiple generations of those guys are the crazy guy on the block. And nobody really wants to mess with them too much because you don't know what they're going to do. They very likely could blow you up, even though they know that they'll be destroyed in return just because they're the crazy guy. So you can use either one of those strategies. Vlad was not the biggest guy on the block. There's no way he was going to take out the Ottomans. So he had to be the craziest guy on the block so that everybody was kind of like, oh, I ain't messing with that dude. That's primarily what the impalements were all about, I think. Basically, it's a political calculation. Vlad's extreme actions can be seen as a calculated political decision aimed at preserving the sovereignty and stability of Wallachia. His harsh methods were designed to deter his enemies and to maintain control over a region facing multiple external threats, like I was saying. We also have to consider his different mental health challenges. Now, it's difficult to apply modern mental health diagnosis to historical figures, but some have speculated about possible psychological factors with Vlad the Impaler. Now, whether Vlad had a personality disorder, a predisposition to violence, or if his actions were primarily strategic remains a topic of debate among historians. I tend to believe that it was probably a little bit of everything. I think it was a brilliant calculation to keep him safe and to keep his people safe because he had to be the crazy guy so nobody would mess with him, right? But also, I think that there was a part of him that kind of enjoyed it. You know, he was sadistic and he enjoyed that cruelty. Sometimes cruelty can be a means of survival as well. In a turbulent political landscape, Vlad may have viewed extreme cruelty as necessary and as his only means of survival. The brutal nature of his rule may have been shaped by the challenges he faced in maintaining power and sovereignty. Now, Vlad the Impaler's legacy is complex, and it has been shaped by both historical record and also by folklore. And over the centuries, his image has been romanticized and exaggerated in various ways. That contributes to a mix of historical fact and legend. It's hard to tell where one starts and the other one stops. But it's important to approach the assessment of historical figures like Vlad the Impaler with an understanding of the cultural and the historical context of their actions. Now, while his methods were undoubtedly brutal, some of the most brutal in history, interpreting his psychological motivations requires considerations of the norms, challenges, and the political dynamics of 15th century Eastern Europe. In basic layman's terms, it was a different time, and things were done differently. One pet peeve of mine is when people look back on historical figures and they try to judge them using today's sensibilities. What is not acceptable today was perfectly acceptable then in a lot of cases. Now, I'm not saying that impaling your enemies on pikes and lining the roadway for 1,000 miles with bodies is okay. That's obviously not okay. But in a lot of cases, historical figures are judged by the way we view things today. And I can tell you, even in my lifetime, things have changed. Things that were routinely said and done in my lifetime now will get you canceled. But it was absolutely no big deal when I was growing up. You know, I'm not going to go into all the different examples because I don't want to get canceled. But things change. And judging historical figures and older people by your standards today isn't really fair to the historical figure because they didn't live in this time period. In their time period, what they were doing could have been perfectly normal. Once again, Vlad was not perfectly normal. What he did was cruel and borderline insane, but probably necessary to keep him alive for as long as he was. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Let me know down in the comments what you think about Vlad the Impaler. As always, it's up to you to make up your own mind, and I will catch you on the next one. Till I speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do I. Bye-bye.